Anyway, so first of all, thank you everyone for coming. I know it's Saturday, it's super cold, but we wanted to do this writing session so that you won't be so lost or, I don't know, feeling anxious about your final exam. Um, I hope this session can help you have a better understanding on how to write an essay. um, Again, I just want to repeat myself here and say that this is not a writing class. This is a literature class, right? But we still want you guys to be able to write beautifully. And if you still feel that you're struggling with writing, I think that's pretty normal, especially because you're all first year students. But you're going to get better at it. That's why you have composition class, right? So I think you're going to improve with time and with all the different classes that you're going to have, be it literature class, linguistics, or any other writing or oral composition class. Um, so, these are basically some of the things that I want to talk about today. I'm going to mention the parts of an essay, and I also prepare something that I think it's very useful when writing an essay. That is some questions that you write yourself before starting writing an essay. So this is something that I used to do when I was a student. I was just talking to Alex and Nemo about this. So when we had a prompt, what I usually do was write down a couple of questions before starting writing my essay. So let me just talk about the introduction first, and then I will mention some of the questions that I will write about if I were you. So basically, the introduction is the most important part of an essay because it states the whole purpose of the essay without giving too much away. So it's like um, your introduction basically makes sure that you're going to have a reader or not. Because usually when you read a paper or a book, you always read the first pages, right? The first, maybe just the first line, and then you decide if you want to keep reading or not. And this will happen to you in the future when you start reading papers. You read the introduction, and if it's not saying much, if it's not catching your interest, you would be like, meh, okay, whatever, and you move on. And then, okay, my cat, go, go. And then, so that's why the introduction is so important because you need to catch the attention of the reader. You also need to talk about um, the prompt. So basically, you will restate the prompt once again and um, make your thesis statement. Okay, so these are some of the questions that I will ask myself before writing an essay. My introduction of the essay, of course. What is the purpose of the essay? What is the argument, the problem, the issue that I want to talk about? Why is it important to talk about this? And how is it relevant to the story? Uh, what role does it play in the story? Okay, so that's some of the questions. Of course, you can also write your own questions, and but I think this could be very useful for you to kind of have an idea of what you think when you're writing your introduction. Okay, and I actually have an example, which I like a lot because it actually has different colors, um, showing you the sections of the introduction here. Okay, so can you guys see my screen? Is it still available? Yes, I
Yes, it
think so,
is.
right? Okay, so this is an example of an introduction here. As you can see, we have different colors. Um, this might be a little bit too long for the nature of the assignment that we're doing, since we're doing an in-class essay, but I think it's pretty much okay. So let's start with the first sentence, the introduction. This is the introducing the whole idea of the paragraph. So the invention of Braille. marked a major turning point in the history of disability. And this, as you can see, is marked in the website as a hook. So this is what is going to catch your reader, catch the attention of your reader. So maybe your reader will be thinking, why did it mark a major turning point in the history of disability? Why is it so important? So that's what that question is going to make your reader want to read more about your essay. Then you will bring everything into context. For example, let's just keep reading. The writing system of raised dot used by blind and visually impaired people was developed by Louis Braille in 19th century France. In a society that did not value disabled people in general, blindness was particularly stigmatized, and a lack of access to reading and writing was a significant barrier to social participation. The idea of tactile reading was not entirely new, but existing methods based on sighted system were difficult to learn and use. Okay, so this is, I don't know if you guys can notice, but this is connected to this first sentence, the hook here, and is bringing everything into context, is already answering a little bit of why Braille is so important and why it marked a turning point in the history of disabilities, but it's not really giving too much away. It's kind of like um, telling you a little bit, but not everything yet. And then the next part is the thesis statement. Again, your thesis statement can be very explicit, or it can also be a little bit implicit and softer. I don't know, as this one. For me, this one is not so explicit. So let me just read. As the first writing system designed for blind people's need, Braille was a groundbreaking new accessibility tool. It not only provided practical benefits, but also helped change the cultural status of blindness. Okay, so as I said, this is not completely explicit, but it's already telling you that it's going to talk a little bit about of the benefits of Braille and how it changed, the cultural status of blindness. And this is again connected to that first sentence that Braille marked a major turning point in history, in the history of disability. And then the last two or three sentences is the structure overview. So basically, here you need to explain how you're going to organize your essay. For example, here this says, this essay begins with discussing the situation of blind people in the 19th century Europe. It then describes the invention of Braille and the gradual process of its acceptance within blind education. Subsequently, it explores the wide-ranging effects of this invention on blind people's social and cultural lives. Okay, so here in this last three sentences, the writer is explaining the reader what to expect in the following paragraphs. So he's already telling you, okay, in this section, I'm going to discuss a little bit about, history. Then I'm going to talk about the invention of Braille, and how it was accepted in blind education. And then in the end, I will talk about the effects of this, into blind people's social and cultural lives. For me, this is a very, very well written introduction. Of course, you can make it longer, make it shorter, but if you have these elements, the hook, the context, the thesis statement, and the structure overview, I think this will be perfect, or at least good enough to get a good score in the introduction section of your essay. So if you guys have any questions, please just feel free to interrupt or anything. So is everything all right so far? Can you still hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you. I think there is a raise hand button. So if anyone
Oh,
wants
okay,
to
okay.
ask
Oh, that's
something,
nice. Thank you. That makes me feel so nice. Less lonely because I can't see the Google Meet when I'm sharing my screen. Okay, let's continue with my PowerPoint. Um, okay, so this is basically what I already talked about. Now, let's say if you choose to write about, I don't know, hospitality in the Odyssey and Aeneid, and you can try to write down some questions on a piece of paper and answer them. So this is not part of your essay yet. It's more of like a brainstorm exercise. You're trying to organize your ideas, try to collect information. It doesn't matter if it is messy, is it all over the place. That's basically the point of these questions, that you can kind of have a map of the ideas that you have for your writing. Okay, so these are some of the examples that I will ask myself if I'm writing about this topic specifically. So first, what is the definition of hospitality? What is the function of hospitality in the plays that we read, right? Not the plays, sorry, but the epic poems that we read. So what function does hospitality play for the Greeks? And how about the Romans? How is hospitality different for the Greeks and the Romans? Is it different? And what are some concrete examples that we can find in the text? What do these examples have in common? And are they different? Why are they different? What are the effects of hospitality? What about inhospitality? Is there any example of this? What happened to people who don't perform, hospitality? Um, where and when does hospitality happen? When it doesn't happen. So these are all the questions that I will have in mind, and if it's even better if you write them down and try to write and always go back to the questions. Am I answering those questions? Am I just jumping without really saying much, jumping from one topic to another without really explaining how I got there in the first place? So that's really important. So you always have to keep in mind that you have a reader. In this case, your reader is the professor, right? And the TAs as well. So you need to imagine that you are talking to us, and you need to make sure that you're explaining everything. You're not leaving anything in the background, and just jumping and or just pointing your fingers at something and then without really explaining anything. You really need to be careful there. So that's why you need to write a draft. And I really, really encourage you to write a draft and read it again. Read it and see if you have any questions, and try to answer those questions right away. Um, so I found some tips on how to write a good essay from the University of Evansville. So let me just share what they have in their online. This is in their online website. They have a writing center and a bunch of online resources for students from all over the world. So these are some of the tips that they have. So about the introduction, they say that the introduction must contain an attention grabber for the reader, or at least make the essay sound interesting. And this is connected to what I said already, that you really want to keep your reader's attention. You want people to read what you have to say. And that's why you need to catch their attention. Um, Ensure that the intro moves from the general to the specific in regard to the topic. So let me just show you this one again. So this was a little bit what's the word? Yeah, general. So we were talking about history and blindness and all the different systems that they use in history and how Braille was created. And then in the thesis statement, it moves from a more general point to a more specific one. That is the change, of cultural, um, how this Braille, helped change the cultural status of blindness. So that's more specific. So the general will be the general discussion of blindness and the history of Braille, and then the more specific one will be how Braille helped change the cultural status of blindness. Okay. Um, and then the introduction also provides the reader with a roadmap. Okay, that's the structure of the essay in a logical order. Again, you can say, so this essay will discuss this in the first section. In the second section, I'm going to talk about this and that, and then I will conclude with that and that. Okay. At the end, there should be what is called a thesis statement. Yeah, I already showed you that in the example. Arguably the most important component of the introduction. And the thesis statement states the aim of the paper. Why are you writing this? Why is it important? Why should people read it? And may give insight into the author's examples and evidence. Insight. Careful with that word. It says give insight. Don't tell us everything already in your introduction. Just give an insight into what you're going to talk and what are some of the examples and the evidence that you're going to use. Then for the body, so the body is it could be 2 paragraphs, it could be 3 paragraphs. It depends on how you organize your essay. It could be like an essay of five paragraphs. So you will have one introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. You can also have 4 paragraphs, one introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. So it all depends on how you decide to organize and how many words you want to write. So the body, of course, includes the evidence and support of the paper in addition to the author's idea. So you will have your textual evidence and your own understanding of the evidence that you're providing, how that is connected to the idea that you're discussing, your own interpretation of why it is important, or yeah, something like this. And then the paragraphs must include a topic sentence which relates the discussion back to the thesis statement. Then we have logical ordering of ideas. Of course, you don't want to just jump from one thing to another. For example, I don't know, you just started writing about hospitality, and then out of a sudden you start talking about love. I mean, what is the connection between hospitality and love? You need to make that connection. You may say, oh well, hospitality is a form of love because the okay. So you need to make that connection. Don't just jump and be like, what? We will be like, whoa, what happened here? Okay, so you just imagine that we're looking at you, and we'll be like, huh, what happened? Okay, so what else? Ensure that the transition sentences are present to create a good flow to the essay. Okay, so here I have something to say. Try to avoid using too fancy words like the pivotal, the quintessential, or the I mean, those words are wow, right? But it doesn't really say that your English is amazing. Actually, this is actually something that a professor said to me a long time ago. He said that what really shows how good your English is how you use easy words. So just use however, but, but make it sound, say a lot of things with the words that you have. Don't just use fancy words and with empty words. So just avoid fancy words that you don't really understand, that you don't really like, that maybe you don't remember how to spell it. Just let it go and just use the good old however and although, I don't know, first, second, third, finally. That's better. What else? Uh, include substantial examples and evidence to support your argument, and remember to cite. Okay, so again, you need to go back to the text. And some of you may say, oh no, I don't want to remember quotes. That's too much. You don't have to remember quotes, but you need to remember where that quote comes from, and you need to at least explain what the quote is about. Okay, so if you're going to talk about Cyclops, for example, you don't really need to memorize a bunch of quotes. You can explain what happened there and be very specific by citing, explaining where exactly in the story, which book, or where exactly in the story this happened. Um, and then this is very, very important as well. Make sure each example is relevant to your particular topic. Don't just add a bunch of quote that might be related to hospitality, but you don't know, but so you just add it for the word count. That's not really ideal and it's not really helpful. And you want to go back to the questions that I told you before and see, is it really relevant? Is it really helpful? Is it making my reader enlightened or whatever? So yeah. And then the conclusion. The conclusion is the should be the easiest part of the essay, because basically you're just repeating what you said in the introduction and in the body paragraph, but using shorter sentences and just paraphrasing yourself. So this section, as I said here, should wrap all your arguments and points and should restate the main argument in a simpler manner. Okay, so I think I'm going to post this link from University of Evansville if you want to go and check. They also have very interesting writing samples that you can look at, and you can use that. So I think that's all for my part. This is just the prompt again for you to maybe look at it and start thinking about what you want to write. Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen right now and welcome Alex or Nemo to give you some interesting examples that we found that you can use. Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions so far? You can always post it on the, what's that called? Message section on Google Meet. So maybe I will carry over. So I will talk about a bad example, just because we've talked about the basic principles of writing an essay. So we think it would be useful if you can see how it's not done. Yeah. So let me share my screen. I apologize for not showing my face because the camera on my computer somehow doesn't work and I can't fix it. So can you all see this Word file?
Yes.
Is it
Yes, we
clear?
can.
Okay. Okay, so please don't worry. This essay was written by none other than Mr. ChatGPT himself, so no human beings will be hurt in our deconstruction of this essay. So maybe let's look at the essay itself. So I think the first few sentences are relatively okay. So this is what Ruth has talked about earlier. Establishing a common ground for your discussion, as these are general facts about the Odyssey and the Aeneid. But I honestly don't think you need to do this in your final essay, because the professor will be reading your essay, and he knows all these facts already. So you don't really have to mention, Homer's Odyssey, blah blah blah, something about this and that. But here comes the more serious issues of this essay. So this is a sentence. While the narratives share common threads, the authors employ subtle variations in tone, emphasis, and societal values to shape their characters' interaction with host and guest. So maybe the first issue is this phrase here, common threads, because it just randomly shows up in this sentence, and ChatGPT never quite explains what exactly is common about the Odyssey and the Aeneid. So I imagine if I were the professor, when I read the sentence, I was like, okay, so you mentioned common threads, but what exactly are the common threads? You need to explain that later. So if you want to put this phrase into your essay, so maybe it would be better to say, well, the narratives share common threads, and these are A, B, C, and D, so you can properly explain what the common threads are. And then after you wrote that sentence, you can move on to discuss the differences between the Odysseys and the Aeneid's handling of the theme of hospitality. I think that's a better way to do it. So this is the issue of this sentence, and let's move on to this one. So yeah, this, I think it sort of counts as a thesis statement, but the issue here is that after reading the sentence, you don't know what is going to happen in the essay, because it says here, shedding light on the nuanced ways in which these foundational works examine and the virtues and pitfalls associated with the costumes and their respective civilizations. So the keyword here seems to be the virtues and pitfalls, but these keywords aren't even explained in this introductory paragraph. So it would make you, if you were to write something like this, it would make your introduction sounds a little vague and unclear. And also, what is missing in this closing sentence or section of the introduction is the, what is that called? Oh, you're supposed to explain what are you going to do in each paragraph, but ChatGPT didn't do it here. So you don't even know what kind of examples that will be talked about in paragraph 1 or paragraph 2. And also missing is the kind of like a summarizing idea for each following paragraph. So maybe you would like to say something like, oh, so the Odyssey depicts hospitality as A, B, and C, and the Aeneid depicts hospitality as B, C, and E, B, C, and D. But these explanations or foreshadowings, if you want to use that word, don't even show up in this section of the introduction. So I think that's a weakness of this introduction section. So is there anything you want to add, Alex and Ruth? Is there anything you want to add, or we're good to move on?
I think we can move on first, and
Okay.
then once we finish, we can see if we can add something more or ask some questions.
Okay. So let's move on to the first body paragraph. So this sentence, as Ruth mentioned earlier, you should give the main points of this paragraph at the very beginning of it. And this sentence doesn't really do that, because it just talks about a general facts of the Odyssey's treatment of hospitality, but it doesn't tell you the features or what's the qualities of it. So that's something missing from this opening sentence. And the bigger issue here is that also, I think this is the key phrase in this paragraph. So the point seems to be that the Odyssey demonstrates the fluid nature of ancient Greeks' idea of hospitality. But this isn't mentioned in the introduction or even in the opening sentence of the paragraph. It just somehow pops out of nowhere in the second sentence. And the bigger issue of in terms of argumentation in the following sentences is that there isn't any textual detail. It doesn't, ChatGPT didn't quote anything, didn't mention any specific characters such as, you know, the Cyclops or the Phoenicians. None of them are here. So if you were to write sentences like this, it will make your argument sound pretty weak. So you're supposed to discuss the fluid nature of ancient Greek idea of hospitality as presented in the Odyssey, but you don't mention any of the scenes or examples or characters that actually appears in this work. So yeah, that's the problem of this body paragraph. And then here we move on to this the second body paragraph. So this is a pretty interesting sentence. So the Aeneid offers a contrasting perspective on hospitality framed within the broader context of Rome. So this can potentially be a very interesting opening sentence of the paragraph. So the contrasting perspective. But the issue here is that we're not really sure what exactly is being contrasted in the Aeneid. So I think that's a weakness. Aeneid encounters, and also the same issue happens here. You know, the lack of textual evidence. So it doesn't mention any scenes, any characters. Oh yeah, it mentions Dido and Latinus. But the issue here is that ChatGPT did mention these characters, but they didn't really contextualize them. You know, what exactly happened between Dido and Aeneas? You know, why exactly is that maybe like a violation of the code of hospitality? ChatGPT didn't explain any of that. So I think the professor will want you to contextualize your evidence. You know, you first mention what happens between Dido and Aeneas, and then you explain why their interaction or the things they say between themselves is a violation to the code of hospitality. I think by doing that, it will make your argument sound more grounded and concrete rather than vague and abstract. And also another key idea is the narrative of imperial destiny, but this doesn't even get explained in this paragraph. It also isn't explained in the opening paragraph, which is the introduction. So blah blah blah. So I think that's the problem with this paragraph. So in conclusion, the ancient Greeks, both epics shares a foundation emphasis on the reciprocal nature of hospitality. So this should have been mentioned in the introduction, but somehow it wasn't. This should be, you know, this could be a supplement to the statement, the common threads in these two epics, but it wasn't even mentioned in the introduction. And this part as well, this should have been put in the thesis statement. You know, this contrast between individual virtues versus societal duty. That should be your main argument, and it should have been mentioned earlier in the essay. Of course, there's another way to writing that puts your main points in the end, but that is not what we're asking you to do at least in this class. So please avoid doing that. Please just, you know, give your main argument at the very beginning so your readers have a pretty good idea of what you're going to do. So I think ChatGPT did a relatively better job in the conclusion, rather compared to what he did in the earlier paragraphs. So yeah, that's all I want to talk about. Any questions or anything to add?
You guys can post the questions if you have any.
Yeah. Or just write them down on the chat box if you are shy or I don't know. Mm,
Alex and Ruth, do you have anything to add or?
Can you go back to the conclusion? I didn't finish reading it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of sounds like an introduction. You know, it could work as an introduction, of course, and it's a little bit more of polishing, but um it's doing a better job than the
Then the actual
actual
introduction.
than the actual introduction, which is
Yeah.
just yeah.
Which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think the main things you have to avoid is to always provide textual evidence and always
Yeah.
contextualize your evidence.
Yeah, and avoid using words that you're not sure.
Yeah. What Rolf
Well,
was talking about, the fancy words, like
yeah, like
ChatGPT likes to use these fancy words that
yeah,
doesn't make like much sense. You
yeah,
don't need to use them.
yeah. The other
They
day I
don't
heard
make it right better.
I heard echelons, and I was like, wow, nobody uses that word. Not even, scholars. Yeah. Um, so make sure that you understand what fluid nature means, or even what was the other one that I saw? I think it was in the introduction. Uh-oh, 15 minutes, only 15 minutes. Uh,
Delving into.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
pretty ChatGPT word.
Mm-hmm. Or the shedding light on the nuanced ways. That also sounds
Pretty
Yeah.
pretty
ChatGPT. Yeah.
ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the thing about it is that it doesn't make the writing better, even if you use them in a correct way. It doesn't help to make your writing better, and and it often makes it less clear for us.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
just
It's
doesn't
like
make sense to use
yeah,
these fancy words.
yeah.
Oh, we have a question.
Okay, let's
Okay.
read it. So, a question about forming the thesis statement. Is it okay to mention one specific aspect instead of a thing with different aspects? For example, when it comes to gender roles in the Odyssey and the Aeneid, though I know there are several aspects to explain how female roles function, as I would like to explain it on one aspect instead of mentioning two or three different aspects. Mm, okay, so yes, I think you can focus on one specific aspect if you think you have enough to say for the general, nature of our essay, that is, an introduction, at least two body paragraph, and a conclusion. If you think you have enough to say about only one aspect, then I think it's okay. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Uh,
Mhm.
if you are able to concentrate on just one particular aspect and bring enough textual evidence, and enough examples of that,
Mm.
uh, and clearly prove your point, then
Yes.
this is actually good.
Yeah, I think only mention what you can do in detail. If you don't
Yes.
have time, please don't mention it because
Yeah.
otherwise it will look very weird.
Yeah. And you will definitely get uh points taken for just leaving something undiscussed.
Yeah, or underdeveloped. Yeah.
Yeah, underdeveloped. That's a better word. Yeah.
So always balance the length of try to balance the length of each paragraph because it's
Mm.
obvious to see if one of your points is underdeveloped if the length is so drastically different. One paragraph is so short and contains like 5 sentences, and the other is like 10 sentences. Gives a
Yeah.
bigger giveaway, pretty much.
Yeah. There's something that I didn't say that I think it's also important when you're writing, just avoid saying, I think, I believe, I guess, or it seems like, it might be. Just avoid those words because when you read it, it's like, are you sure? It seems like you're not really sure about what you're writing. You're writing this, you're trying to convince other people that what you're writing is true, but then you're also not sure about it. So I would say just avoid the first person. Um, and I think that's a good practice, because
Yeah,
generally, yeah, for academic writing, we don't use I or we unless you're a famous scholar that can get away with anything.
Yeah, I think we is
as
more
I think it's
acceptable. Yeah, we.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we is relatively more
Uh,
acceptable.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
We,
especially for an essay, you don't need to bring any new ideas here, right?
yeah,
Like when you want to claim something which no one has ever said before, you probably may use words like might or I think,
mm-hmm.
but it is for your future projects, not for an in-class essay. You're
Yeah,
not going to say anything new, right?
yeah. You're just organizing what you learn and your ideas, your own interpretation of the text. I guess what we're trying, don't use I guess. What we're trying to say is we want to see that you have digested the text. That means that you have read it, that you understand, and that you have something to say about it.
Yeah, I think in terms of that, language, ChatGPT actually did a pretty good job. Yeah, it avoided using first-person pronouns or many of the hedges we've talked about earlier, like might,
I don't think
may,
ChatGPT
perhaps.
ever uses first person.
Yeah, because that's very problematic. I mean, should we consider AIs as individuals? Okay. Anyone else have any other questions?
We are gonna have a look at. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it works.
Thank you. Yeah. So we are gonna have a look at what a better essay is. This is not actually an essay. This is the whole paper, but it still contains all the parts of the essay which have been covered by Ruth. So let's start from having a look at the introduction of this paper. The Odyssey portrays a number of epic performances and thus puts before us a range of internal audiences consisting of characters in poem itself. Most of these are exclusively male, when female are present. So, from already these two introducing sentences, we can have an idea of what we are going to be talking about. We are going to be talking about performances, audiences, and genders. And this is what the whole essay talks about. And a bit later, we get to some specific points of this essay. And this is the first. Odysseus is thus portrayed as breaking a pattern by including women in his audience. So will be important in this essay. After surveying the evidence for this portrayal, I will argue that it is part of a narrative strategy to include women in the implied audience of the poem. So yes, this is straight to the main point of the essay. This is the main argument, but I will conclude by considering the implication of this inclusion for female members of the actual audience. Yes, and it doesn't reveal actually what conclusion gonna be drawn. Yet it points out all the main ideas that will be covered in this essay. And I wanted us to have a look how this paper actually keeps focus on the ideas that are brought in the introduction. So we have already discussed the importance of keeping focus of what we are talking about. In the introduction, we have a statement that most of the audience are exclusively male, and going a bit further, we can actually see that this question is later addressed. Yeah. Going, for example, here. At several points, the narrative calls attention, either directly or indirectly, to the fact that a bird's intended audience includes males but not females. So we get to the point that has been touched upon in the introduction. The idea is further developed here. A more direct piece of evidence for the exclusion of women from internal audiences for body performance can be found in Book 1. So we talk about the male audience of performances within the epic and the exclusion of women. So we're still talking about the main ideas that has been pointed out in the introduction: the performance, audience, and genders. We have also seen that the article claims that Odysseus actually breaks this pattern if he includes women in his audience. And the essay gets to this idea in the later part. We can see it, for example, here. Yeah, in other words, she is a member and a privileged one of the implied audience of Odysseus' tale. So the article addresses the idea of implication of women in the tales that are told by Odysseus. And later here, Odysseus can be seen as including in his audience a woman whom others have excluded, either directly or by implication from the normal audience for such tales. So we see the development of this idea, which is also developed later in the further parts. An examination of the Odysseus content and gender increases the plausibility of women's inclusion in its implied audience. And to prove this idea, as you can see, the author brings a lot of textual evidence, a lot of examples which actually show that this is true. In book 23, Odysseus tells his nostos in full to her alone. The detail in which it is summarized has one clear effect. So the author explains why in this occasion we see a female audience as actually implied audience of the tale, and we see a particular example of this from the book. And we also remember that the author pointed out. And I will argue that despite of native slavery to include women, I will conclude by considering the implication of this inclusion. So the author wanted also to draw some conclusion of what it actually means. Why Odysseus's tales are heard by women, why women are present in his audience. And this is where the essay actually gets in the very end. Starting from this particular paragraph, it remains to consider the relationship between the implied female audience I have posited and actual female audiences of the poem. So it actually addresses the question of what effect this particularity produces. And it finally gets to some conclusion, which is directly related to what has been said in the introduction. As a result, the subversion is not suggested to the female audience and does not extend to the double sexual standard. And the concluding sentence is also absolutely clearly related to the introduction, while enhancing the self-worth of chaste aristocratic women and implying an equality of intelligence between them and their male partners. A woman's identification with Arid and Penelope has also reinforced the patriarchal norms for female behavior to which these characters adhere. So this perfectly corresponds with the introduction. So this basically answers this question. And as you can see, it gets to the conclusion, which is related to the introduction. So you see with this example how you should keep focus on the ideas that you bring up in the introduction. We do not go anywhere away from talking about performances, audiences, and genders. The whole article talks about this. We can see it in every paragraph of the article. Moderate piece of evidence for exclusion of women from internal audiences for bardic performances, right? So we are talking about genders, performance, and audience. And we get to all the questions that has been addressed in the very introduction. And I would also like us to have a look of the example of how we write paragraphs, because we have been mostly talking about general idea about the parts of the essay, about how we should construct the essay, but it is also important to write paragraphs in a good way. And what I wanted to say about this is a paragraph is actually a single idea, is one point that you want to prove. And within one paragraph, you usually want to start the paragraph by generally introducing what you are going to be talking about the paragraph. You could see that when I was referring to the themes in the essay, I could easily tell the theme of the paragraph by referring to the first sentence of the paragraph. So I look at this sentence. At several points, the narrative calls attention either directly or indirectly to the fact that the bird's intended audience includes males but not females. So I know this paragraph is going to be about the domination position of males among the audience, right? And this is what it actually talks about. It brings textual evidence later, but it starts by introducing what is going to be addressed. And this is a good example also of how to finish a paragraph, it is often good to summarize in the last sentence what you have been talking in this paragraph, what you actually said. This close correspondence between the song and its setting reinforces the implied comparison between the male gods as spectators in the song and the presumably all male audience entertained by Demodocus. So yeah, this is what we showed by the evidence in this paragraph, and this is what we actually saw in this paragraph. So this is how you want to write your paragraphs, and this also, I think, helps you to keep your focus on your main argument, on the ideas that you brought up in the introduction. So you can just write the last sentence, summarize what you have been talking about, and ask yourself, is it related to what I say in the introduction? Is it really related to my topic? And it should be explicitly related. It should be clear that it is not some other theme. It is not something that is not related to your topic, to your main argument. So I think that is pretty much it, what I wanted to say. Do you guys want to add something? Did I miss something?
Yeah, I really like what you said about the paragraphs, right? So another way to see is that every single paragraph of your body will have a short introduction and a short conclusion. So it's like a sentence that is introducing what you're going to talk in that paragraph, and then a short conclusion that will be one or two sentences again, going back to what you already said, and this is already connected to your introduction. So I guess what you need to do is to step back and see if just take a look at it and see if everything is connected to the things that you claim that you wanted to discuss in your introduction, and if you provided enough examples of the ideas that you presented. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Could you please provide us with some examples of proper sentence structure or forms of descriptions that are suitable for us to give further explanation after we cite some textual evidence?
Yeah, I think we can go back to the paragraph that you just talked about.
Um,
Yeah, I mean the one.
I, I,
where-
I don't really understand what you mean by proper sentence structures.
I think this classmate is talking about how do you explain your text or evidence? Do you say as this suggests or as this indicates? What's the how to start an analytical sentence? I think that's the question.
Yeah, okay. So, for example, we can relate to the text. So here, the author refers to someone else, as recent scholarship has shown, but you can easily use this phrase to relate to the evidence that you have mentioned, as can be seen from what has been said above, or and here it is stated that the female gods out of modesty so by relating to the text, and here it is stated. So it is a reference to the quote, to the textual evidence, and I understand female gods out of modesty stayed behind. So yeah, the reference to the text in this case proves the idea that female gods stay behind. So this is this proves the idea that male audience dominate the the audience that listen to the tale. So basically, this is a question of analyzing what you are referring to. You quote something, or you don't have to quote in this in the classes. Say you relate to something in the text, and you explain how this actually proves your point. I hope you know what you mean. What I mean.
Or maybe another way to do it is you can specify a literary device that you see in a sentence. So maybe you can say, oh, so as shown in this sentence, there is a contrast between imagery A and imagery B, and you argue that this contrast actually somehow connects to your point.
You basically explain how the textual evidence proves your idea. So this happens there. This means that, as can be seen from this example, our female audience is not present or is oppressed here, and the scene is dominated by male audience, for example.
Or you can just single out a word or two. What words suggest domination or oppression in this particular textual evidence that you just quote. Yeah, you can also do that. Focus on a word or two. Yeah.
What words or what situation? How the text proves your point. Did I answer your question? Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Okay, so I think we can just end the meeting right here. Thank you everyone for joining us on a Saturday night. Don't worry too much about the final. Everything will be fine. Try to work hard and don't just rely on the easy way. Try to work hard and you will be okay. If you don't do anything that is not um that is not bad, then you will definitely be okay. Trust yourself. Be confident.
Yeah, and if you really do have some questions about your essay writing, you can always send your draft to us or Professor Nolan. We will try to see what can be improved. Oh, I think there's a question. Is it okay to cite the materials that we did not read but are in the books?
I'm not really sure if I understand what you mean because
I think the students talks about the parts of the book that we didn't cover.
oh, okay,
Is that
okay.
Right?
But you read it? Is that what you mean? So it's like you read it by yourself on your own, and you want to use that part?
Yeah, I think if this is the case, there should be no problem about it.
Yeah, so if this is the case, it should be fine because you read it, so and you think that's useful for what you're going to discuss, you can use that. Just make sure that you provide enough examples and that you explain it, and that you don't just drop something from a book that we didn't read and just leave it like that. make sure to, as we said already, to explain everything.
And also, maybe you can, just to be, cautious, you can mention the examples from the books that we did read, and also the books that you've read on your own. So I think that would be a safer approach, because the point of the exam is to show the professor that you understood the things that we covered in class. So in-class materials are also quite important in your essay writing. So is there any other questions that you would like to ask? All right, then. I think if there are no questions, I think we can just end it here. So thank you for participating in this session. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask us through email. You can also ask Professor Nolan, of course. So I hope you all be doing a great job on your exam. So thank you, guys.